And I was basically teaching myself everything that I had to know to get into this field. Got an opportunity to do my thesis in Switzerland. I miss that. Sometimes I have a very, very talented team. Thank you very much. Am I audible? Just fine, right? Okay. Full disclosure, I am not very prepared for this presentation today. I literally just put together a bunch of things, so I'm just gonna teach it in a, like, do it in a storytelling style. So feel free to stop me, ask me questions. There is no format. I'm just gonna talk about what I believe in, what I have been doing for the past decade or so, and let's just keep it a little bit conversational. Is that okay? Great. Okay, so what I'm basically talking about, the premise of my work looks at how craft, and mainly traditional craft, in India we understand craft as traditional craft. It's always steeped in ethnographic context. It has a culture, it has a certain community practicing in a certain location. There's a very strong story attached to it. Now obviously there's a certain skill, there is a lot of wealth of knowledge that these people have. What happens when the world starts moving towards electronics, AI, computation, etc., etc.? Do these skills become obsolete, or they somehow transform themselves? So far crafts have always been something that has responded to the environments. Let's just take like the Bhujodi shawl, for example. They used to make like these proper shawls for cattle herders, for the Rabari community. It was like a nice thick sheep wool shawl, which later on, as they saw that the acrylics came in, the markets changed, etc., they had to evolve to something a little bit more urban, like the dupattas and the stoles, etc. They've always sort of started to grow and respond to the environments around them. So craft is not static, is basically what I'm getting at. And my hypothesis or my practice looks at what happens in the next stage. When dupattas and stoles were modern and interesting, they sort of matched that. What happens now when your computation and all of that is sort of the next status quo? Where do these people sort of fit in? So this is basically what I mean. How does technology sort of affect the way crafts evolve over time? So a little bit about me. Why am I qualified to even talk about this in the first place? I come from a textile design background. I started my journey at NID now monkey years ago. I studied textile design there for 4 years, but there was somehow a part of me that did not feel at home with the context that textile design was looking at. So we basically had a very sort of a two-pronged way of understanding textile design. It was either you're ending up making garments or you're doing home furnishings. Or the third is you're probably working with craft communities to do some kind of design intervention. While the material sort of fabric as a medium always spoke to me, but what it was sort of coming out as was not really very interesting for me. But luckily for me, I got an opportunity to do my thesis in Switzerland. So as a bachelor student, most of you, I can see a lot of our students as well. So you have a bachelor thesis. So one of my bachelor thesis as a student was in Switzerland, and that's where I sort of discovered words like design research, innovation, smart textiles, etc. Things that I had zero understanding of. Research is not really something that comes to us naturally as designers, and this is sort of what I realized also going there. But what was a very eye-opening moment for me was that I realized that as a designer, you're given the tools to look at life in a different way. That does not just necessarily mean that it ends up in an aesthetic intervention. It can actually mean very technical and scientific intervention as well. And this is what basically just blew my mind completely. Till then, I thought I was going to be like a nice Phoolpatti designer making, home furnishing fabrics for some company, making a good buck, and that's life. But this experience completely changed it. But I came back to India. Smart textiles, e-textiles, koi kuch baat nahi kar raha tha. The moment I said that word, they said, "Acha, fire retardant kapde bana do." But that's not what I meant, and I didn't even know what I meant at the time, to be honest. But fire retardant was definitely not what I meant. So I started tinkering around a little bit. One of my mentors pushed me and he said, "You've been sitting on this idea for too long." I wrote a proposal for the Smart Textile Design Lab in Sweden, which basically spoke about combining my two loves. I found myself at a crossroad. Just came back from Switzerland, understood design research, understood innovation. I wanted to work with this new tech, new research, etc., innovation. But at NID, we worked so closely with crafts that my heart was there. They were like family to me. A lot of my association came from them. So it was like a crossroads, na? या तो आप future में जाओ, या तो आप past में जाओ. You can't do both. But one of my sort of brainstorming sessions, I said, why not both? And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like an idea. Why didn't people think about this before? It was like such a match made in heaven. And the rest of my presentation will tell you why. But I started doing that. I started tinkering around with some materials. I went to a friend. I asked him to show me how to light up an LED, which I didn't know at the time. So we went to the field. We went to the weaver. We said, हमको इस तरह से integrate करना है. Can you help? I made my first woven circuit, and that's what we eventually ended up patenting. That's my life now. But anyway, the long story short is that I spent the last few years sort of discovering what this really meant. Textile karna hai, but aisa textile nahi karna hai. And then, what exactly does that mean for me is something that I sort of spent a fair amount of time figuring out. So this is just sort of a timeline of everything I did. I messed around with experiments. Of course, this is a part of my life. Like everybody I had to earn bread, so I was just doing classical textile design as well, and using that money to sort of fuel my experiments. Later on, moved back to Switzerland, did my master's there, worked as a research assistant, and that's kind of when I started working with heating. I was working with embedded heating. A part of one of my other patents was also there, and that gave me like a lot of motivation. My master's was actually a turning point in my life. I was able to gain, support from the likes of IKEA Foundation Switzerland. I won a lot of prizes. Somehow the Swiss got it, I was really struggling to explain to people here. I just went there and people were finishing my sentences. And I felt like, okay, there's no other better place to be, because here I'm just understood and heard. But I think then the turning point came in my life, like everybody, COVID. I came back for field work. My visa expired. I was back in the 48-degree land from the Alps. Not a very nice, pretty picture to be. But eventually ended up sort of struggling, gave myself a year of a nice pity party, applied for PhDs, didn't work out. And then I thought, okay, if I have to be here, Anuvad has to be here. But how do you sell heating to Ahmedabadis? It's absolutely, it's like an oxymoron. And that's when I sort of discovered interactive technology. I said, okay, this is the kind of integration that I work with is something that can sort of implement itself in a lot of different ways. E-textiles also has a lot of technophobia around it. Touch करके कोई भी बोलेगा current लगेगा इसके अंदर electricity. How do you tell somebody that an intimate material, such an intimate material, fabrics, regardless of whether you have a background in materials or textiles, you have something to do with it. You can be like a rocket scientist and you still have something to do with textiles. So it is one of the most intimate materials. If I tell you I've put some electricity in it, it's going to blow your mind. So there's a lot of technophobia around it. How do you sort of navigate that? So I had to start coming up with something that was very playful and interactive, something that sort of broke the walls down. And craft did that beautifully because it was already aesthetic. It was already something that felt familiar, but it behaved in a very non-familiar way. And that, I think, became sort of, that sweet spot that I was looking for all of these years. And like I said, I've been around for monkey years, so this timeline ends at 23, but we're 3 years down now. So yeah, this is basically like what I was doing in Switzerland. I was working with 3D printing technology on textiles. So my job there was to basically look at how does, a technology sort of contextualize itself in a technical way. I was supposed to come up with a collection of ideas, but not an aesthetic collection, a collection of ideas that basically makes very commercial, competitive sense. Printing technology coming in the market, has to compete with the likes of the conventional printing technologies, screen printing, digital printing, etc. अगर ये machine वो ही कर सकती है, तो you don't need a new one. That was basically the argument. So how do you really play with the machine? The technology is there. How do you really convince partners that this really has a value addition? And that's kind of what I was doing there. And again, as a designer, I was forced to think from the other lens. I was not looking at mood boards. I was not looking at this Pantone, that Pantone, which I sort of thought was going to be my life as a designer. And cut to, I'm here looking at flow rates and looking at pigment, dilution, and I'm looking at, scientific numbers. I'm speaking to German engineers who, barely speak a word of English sometimes. It was a very weird way of sort of understanding what your understanding of textiles, the tools that you're given, can contextualize in so many different ways. And that was a eureka moment for me. So basically, like, this is what led to the beginning. Like I said, I was, this was a sort of a pivotal moment for me. I thought, okay, this is home. This is kind of what I think I can do for the rest of my life. And but my life was at the time also not in Switzerland, it was in India. And a lot of my understanding of textiles came from craft. It came from handwork. It came from all the communities that I had interacted with over the last 4 years. So I really found myself at the crossroads, and I started to wonder whether I was being unfaithful to one if I was sort of choosing the other. And that's kind of where Anuvad found itself. Started as a research project. I will also, take you through all of that, the things that I messed around with. But it started as a research project, was never supposed to be a business. I don't know how it is today, but it is. And this is life. You just take the steps that you see and you sort of find yourself somewhere. So this is the first LED I ever lit. It was a huge moment for me because I come from a commerce background. Even my 11th and 12th was in commerce. I was very good at stats, and a lot of my faculties thought I could have been a CA or done an MBA. I eventually managed to scratch that itch later as well, but again, story for later. So the idea was to basically work with crafts, right? Now, how do you go to a weaver and say, "मेरे को कपड़े में बत्ती डालना है"? नहीं बोल सकते. He'll be like, get out of here, what is this? And this is not making sense. So what I had to do was basically I had to make a visual prototype for him to understand what I really meant. How is this going to work? And that sort of also again is going to tie back to something I'm going to talk about later, about how do you really develop the communication tools to work with something that feels a little anticlimactic, in that sense. So this was literally the first sample we ever did. We went on field. We told him, hey, look, we've put a bunch of LEDs in this. We were wondering if we were able to, weave a circuit out of it. And a couple of hours later, we ended up doing that. And somehow it was so successful that I eventually ended up patenting it. So, one of my sort of, again, one can argue that, you're going there and you're taking something that is so traditionally rooted, there's such a strong context in it. Why are you messing around with it? Why does technology have to come in everywhere? Fair point. And my argument is that I am not the one who has the agency to answer that question. So I actually asked one of the weavers, I said, hey, we're putting this sort of LEDs in this. Is that making you uncomfortable? Is that something that is making you feel like this is, this is my language, don't mess with it? And he said something, I don't know how many of you speak Gujarati, but I'm just going to say it in Gujarati and then, I'll translate it for the rest of you. He said ke pehla ame kaach nakta tha kapad ma. They used to actually take glass, they used to sand it, using broken terracotta pieces, make their forms, embroider on it, etc. Then he said, then acrylic aaya, Swarovski aaya. So they basically pivoted to all of these other sort of, there were stick-ons in terms of mirrors, all of that. They pivoted to that. And then he said, "Ame future ma jaine LED lagavisu." So what he was basically trying to mean through this metaphor was that they evolve with what is the material, the environment, the context around them. It's not static. The skill of embedding, or let's say the skill of creating the technique, is what they own. That's not going anywhere. Whether I put a certain kind of a mirror or I put an LED, the skill remains the same. And that it was actually very heartening for me to see that he basically echoed that sentiment. So yeah, I messed around with a lot of things. I basically gave myself experiments. Again, I mean, mind you, by now I was already out of bachelor's. So there was nobody to give me assignments, nobody to tell me, okay, now this is your next step, this is what you do. And I was basically teaching myself everything that I had to know to get into this field. But 4 years of design education taught me that you learn by doing. And that's kind of what I did. I basically gave myself assignments. I said, okay, I learned how to put light in fabric. Now, how do I basically make it look aesthetic? Can I make it sharper? Can I make it diffused? Can I sort of cover it? What can I do with it? How do I basically, play around with how it manifests itself onto the fabric? Things like that. Can I look at, something a little bit more three-dimensional? So then I played around with Bandhani and I played around with, glow in the dark pigment, etc. So this kept on happening, but I hit a wall. I basically, at some point, I realized, okay, I did whatever I could possibly do, but I had no mentor, no resources, nothing to basically tell me what's next. I did all the tinkering I possibly could. And as a way of sort of finding that answer of what's next, I ended up going to Milan to do a sort of a workshop module with the European Space Agency. They're the European vertical, of. So basically, the idea here was to look at tech couture. Again, these things are not supposed to be worn at home. It's couture, so it's contextual, it's narrative, it's just a piece that is supposed to make a dramatic sort of statement. The idea was to look at space as a whole and come up with a garment that would sort of speak about any one segment of the space that sort of you resonated with it the most. So this was like a collab between the Politecnico di Milano and the European Space Agency. So obviously the fashion was the common thread. And I went through a lot of like astronaut interviews, and one thing that really came out for me was the first flight that an astronaut takes into space. The first time that they see the Earth from a third person point of view. What was that like? So that is, for most people, that's what kind of got them going to the next flight and the third flight and the fourth flight. So they spoke about this being a very meditative experience, about how automatically it makes you feel so small as a human, because it sort of contextualizes everything and puts everything into perspective. And I chose to sort of take that as my inspiration and as my hook, and I created this garment which basically worked with, so I worked with origami, I worked with folding, and I embedded LEDs inside the structure of this sort of a fan, which was, the idea was that it would open up when I'm ready to speak to the world, and it would close up when I want some kind of so this was sort of mimicking what the space would look like. It was just like these blinking little lights, and it's completely enclosed, it's just you, it's very meditative, it's very isolating. So I did that. Again, didn't answer the question, iske baad kya? Fashion to mere ko karna nahi tha. I was very clear on that. For reasons that I can talk about later. I think this is going to be too long a presentation if I get into that. So then I basically moved back to Switzerland. I got an opportunity from the same university that gave me a thesis project. They, quite liked what we did with Dafod, the 3D printing machine. They said, why don't you come do your master's with us and, work with us along the side? Great, my mom doesn't have to pay for my master's, jumped at that opportunity. And that actually became a life-changing experience for me, because I was not only studying, I was also working. So I was able to contextualize a lot of what I was doing in a very real world understanding. I was working in the research lab, which was working with companies to solve real world problems. So I was not just looking at design from the theoretical sort of experimental point of view. I was looking at design with real life applications, with things like finance attached to it, things like markets attached to it, things like robustness, things like repair. All of those things were actual questions that we were asking. So that gave me a lot of good perspective as to how does something that is so experimental sort of manifest itself in the real world. And through my 2.5, 3, 4 years around it, I basically ended up working, with electronic textiles a lot. I worked with heating. And again, it was a very interesting time to be working with heating, because if you remember, that was the time when the gas prices were really shooting up in Europe, and it was like a whole new story. And obviously, I was facing the brunt of that, because I was also paying these bills as a student. But so the idea was, how do you really look at heating from a more sustainable point of view? Can you heat your immediate spaces versus like heating an entire building with just 2 people living in it? And that's kind of what I started to explore. And I ended up, with a collection which actually became another turning point, because it not only won me a lot of awards. I ended up getting like support from the IKEA Foundation, all of that. So it really became like my aha moment. It really became like a point in my life where I thought, okay, I found my eureka moment. I found my my exact sweet spot. And the idea was here, basically, I created a bunch of cushions and rugs that are working with power banks and laptop chargers. So the idea was to also see, if you're, how do you not complicate technology? It's already such a complicated thing. How do you not complicate it? Because I mean, even us as users, I don't want to have another thing that I have to maintain, another charger I have to maintain, another battery, etc., etc. So my thought process was that, if you are wanting to bring technology into people's lives, it doesn't have to become another chore, and only then it can succeed. There's no other way. It has to be extremely intuitive. It has to be something that just blends into your life. Otherwise, it's never going to work. So I did a bunch of those experiments. This is a photo. I didn't bring the videos because it was just getting very heavy, but we, along one of those experiments, we worked with capacity sensing, touch sensing as they call it, and it also, like, we showed it to the artisans. So again, like, just to speak a little bit about the artisans, I always was very clear about one thing, is that if somebody is coming and playing around with a skill that I have known myself, my father, my grandfather, everybody to sort of associate with, I have the final say on what happens with it. And same is with the artisans. They have to have the agency to decide to what extent can you mess with it. So for me, it was always very clear. I didn't want to be a designer, this urban educated researcher designer, who's going there, giving them spec sheets saying, ye bana do. For me, it was actually very clear from the outside that I wanted to collaborate with them. I wanted them to say, okay, I wanted them to be as invested in the process as I was. Otherwise, this was never going to last. They'll do it for the money and then it's just going to be thrown out of the window. So basically, what I was doing through a lot of that was, I was also showing these experiments to them. I was bringing them into sort of informal chat sessions, and I was just asking them what they think about it. It took me 6 years, and I'm not kidding, it took me 6 years for the first time that the artisan told me, kaam karne mein maza aayega. And I'm not kidding, this felt like an award moment for me. I could have very well gone there from the first day saying, this is the circuit, this is how you embed it, these are the colors, these are the Pantones, banao. But that's not the style I wanted to follow. Exactly. So this is basically what I meant, that you are trying to align with the craft. They're not looking at people, who are going to sort of, maybe guide is actually a much softer word, who are going to direct them, into what's next. If you recall, all of the craft communities, all of the stories that you've seen so far were always done by the artisan being at the core. तभी कोई designer नहीं था. कौन सा कलर कहाँ लगाना है, कौन सा मोटिव कहाँ जाना है, what is the layout going to look like, there was no designer. They were doing it themselves. So where did that knowledge go? Where did that skill go? Innately, they know that, right? So that's basically what, my idea was to sort of harness. How do you really align with their innate thought processes and still sort of lead them on through collaboration into something that you feel can be sort of the next, idea. So I spoke a little bit about the collaboration. I spoke about, me not wanting to sort of, direct them, and me not wanting to sort of create this hierarchical structure between the artisans. And over a period of, 6-7 years that I worked with them, I sort of figured out a lot of mistakes, a lot of insights, a lot of things that worked, a lot of things that didn't work. And I put together a craft collaboration toolkit. And for all the students here, in fact, anybody who's working with crafts, reach out to me if you want this. This is completely open source. I don't, charge for this at all. I basically just kept this as an exercise to promote as many people wanting to work with crafts in sort of a collaborative way as possible. The only sort of caveat here is that if you take this, you have to come back with a very detailed feedback and add to the insights if you found anything missing. So it's basically like an ever-evolving sort of a research experiment that I'm doing. And yeah, more on that later. So cut to, what do I do today? All of this was my past life. I was never going to start a business. COVID happened, I came back. Though the heating thing was going to turn into a business, I was going to launch it in Switzerland. but obviously the COVID, wave hit, and I was basically pushed into a completely different geography, a completely different life, and basically shook me. I shook my complete basis of what I was going to do. I had a plan. I knew what my next 5 years were going to look like. Suddenly, I didn't even know if I could even sell to Switzerland, let alone make it here. So that's kind of where, after a lot of crying, after a lot of thinking, speaking to people, I thought, okay, my life is in India, at least for the foreseeable future. What does that look like, and what does e-textiles look like in India? And what you're seeing here is what we're doing today, and it's already been now 5-6 years since COVID has happened. We launched the company in 21. Didn't know what to do with it for again a year. We started operationally working in 23 end, actually mid 23, July, August sometime. So we've basically only been around for 2.5 years. We're like an infant in the scene of companies. I'm not really somebody who's been done a lot and gone around, but so through this time I have basically also learned what it means to sell something to people that they've never really seen. And obviously we got a lot of pushback, we got a lot of resistance, we got a lot of people questioning, but क्यों करना है, कपड़े में से music क्यों लाना है, my kapda as it is fine, I don't need music coming out of it. Fair point. I mean, I was basically selling things that were not a need, they were a want. It's a nice to have thing. That's kind of how they phrase it in management books as well. It's like either you have a need to have product or you have a nice to have product. I was a nice to have product. How do you create demand for a nice to have product? And obviously these things don't come cheap, because you're putting the artisans, you're putting electronics, you're putting R&D, you're putting so many things. So it's turning out to be a product that people don't know what to do with it. But we stuck around, we heard the people very intently. We started with something that was actually working on an app first, and then sort of people said, hey, I have kids, I don't want to give them screens to play with it. So we heard that, and then we sort of embedded the whole thing, the sounds and all of that in the frame. Then somebody said, why do I have to have an adapter to charge it? It's just like another sort of challenge and another sort of piece to maintain. I don't want to do that. So then we said, okay, let's just put batteries inside it. Then somebody said, you have an embedded battery, I don't want to charge the frame, can I not just remove the battery, charge it elsewhere, put it back? That's how we came up with a removable battery option. So basically my idea is that when you're trying to create something that, and first and foremost, mind you, I was not here to make money, or, well, I was, who doesn't, but that was not the primary focus. I was not here to make money. I was also here to create an idea, an ecosystem that felt sustainable, and not sustainable in the ecological sense, that felt sustainable in the systemic sense. If you are not going to be able to give the artisans work, you may as well shut shop today. And if I'm not getting work, I'm not giving them work. So clearly I have to create something that is giving me an inflow to give an outflow to them, right? Clear mathematics. You have to create demand to give supply. So basically, I was very clear that if I don't create products that become, very intentional, become pieces that people very automatically want to sort of get around to, very automatically want to sort of adopt, it's never going to last. So anyway, cut to what we do today is we basically work in 3 main verticals. The last vertical I can't speak about for legal reasons, but the first 2 verticals are basically like products and installations, and the third is R&D partnerships. Again, these things are very high IP, high NDA protected things, so I can't really talk about it on this platform, but I'll give you a little insight on what that looks like and what that means. So when I say products, what does it really mean? Obviously, products are something that, follow a huge umbrella of a lot of different things. But from our point of view, a product is basically any kind of interactive artifact, let's just call it like that, that people are going to be using on a regular to a semi-regular basis, right? So my design thought process from this is very clear. I am not looking at, of course, I'm looking at the aesthetics and I'm looking at the mood boards and the colors and all the pretty things, but I'm also looking at repair, I'm looking at modularity, I'm looking at after sales, I'm looking at warranty, I'm looking at life value, I'm looking at repairability, I'm looking at serviceability, I'm looking at all of those things, because mind you, we're actually selling a tech product. So we're erring on the sides of, consumer electronics, but we're still a designer. So it is very important that the thought process, a lot, and this is actually, if you listen in on one of the talks that we have at the studio also, it's very clear that a lot of our arguments and discussions follow around, is this interesting for the user to manage, or is this interesting for the user to follow? Is this another sort of cumbersome add on, another cumbersome chore? That is our core. The design and all of that follows. That is sort of our handwriting. That is something that we've already evolved. So basically, when I say products, I mean technology that has been tested, is robust, is something that I can guarantee you that, out of 10, 8 things we've already thought of. Maybe you come up with 2 more and you say, hey, child, can I, maybe have this extra sort of a feature? And, we completely hear you and we try to sort of create the next version accordingly. But that's kind of what the product is. When I speak about installations, these are sort of immersive environments that we create. And we actually have a little bit of fun here because these are supposed to be for a fixed period of time, right? यहाँ तो कोई event है, some exhibition, some curator, somebody is working with us. So we actually take this as a platform to mess around with tech that we don't know exactly if people are going to like, how are they going to perceive it, how are they going to respond to it. We have no user insights whatsoever. So we basically use this as our playground, to mess around with this kind of tech. And then when something really strikes, we work on it, we go back to the drawing table, we make it more robust, we put in more R&D, and then we launch it as one of our products. So that's kind of how, these two things work. This actually becomes very interesting for us also because creatively it allows us to, sort of bring the whole showmanship to show. We look at lighting, we look at sound, we look at the entire journey of the visitor from the moment that they enter the space to when they get out. Everything has to resonate, and it's a lot of like fun for us. Also, it's one of the chances for us to actually speak to the people, and see sort of experiences and reactions in the first go. Sometimes that really, throws back in our face as well. No kidding, this happens. The times that we have been up at 3 in the night knowing subhe 9 baje, exhibition khul raha and nothing is working. I cannot tell you the number of times we've gone through that. But again, when it's something really does, it's a huge validation that really just pays off for everything that we have been working towards. So a little bit about the R&D. We basically also work with corporates on R&D partnerships. Again, like I said, these things are very closeted, can't really speak a lot about it, but we basically work with OEMs and other manufacturers to sort of redefine what spaces can look like, cars can look like, etc. We're looking at technology and the contextualizing of that in a very futuristic sense. So this is very like production related. We're looking at scientific testing, we're looking at metrics, we're looking at wear and tear, we're working with, all that sort of stuff. So these things are very technical, but obviously there is a huge design element sort of involved in it. But these things would, let's say, they'll see the light of day in 2-3 years if we're lucky. But yeah, so all of this has sort of allowed us to gain a fair amount of validation. And basically what our process has been so far is that we just let people come to us, talk to us, and then we try to say yes more than we say no. And then that's just kind of how we discover what's next, because it's very clear to us as a team that we are a tech-led company, meaning we work with electronic textiles. And how this electronic textiles manifests, whether it is in your home, or it manifests in your car, or it manifests as a gallery installation, or it manifests as, I don't know, some kind of a school interactive installation, or it manifests into some kind of senior care, I don't know. There are so many use cases that sort of open up. We try to see what's interesting for us in the moment, and we respond to it as we go along. So if you ask me what you're going to do the next, let's say 2 years, I don't know. You'll have to ask me then and find out. So that's kind of how my process has been. But I spoke a little bit about, wanting to do CA and MBA and all of that. So I have this itch that I wanted to scratch as a student. Then NID happened. NID used to give a diploma, which basically means nothing in the educational world, and which wouldn't allow me to do an MBA. But I wanted to be like an IIM grad, in a past life, in way past a life. But what that sort of led me to do today is that, and in fact, I just ended a program at the IIMA yesterday, which is why I'm not prepared for this. So, I want to apologize for that. What I'm trying to now do is also how does this fit in? So my life is basically a lot of questions. I'm sure that's also very evident in how I am taking this conversation forward. Is I'm just asking the questions. I don't have answers. So if you come and ask me answers, I don't have them. I'm just asking questions like, what happens with the crafts? Okay, when I work with the crafts, how does that contextualize in R&D partnerships? Because a lot of the crafts don't really fit into mass manufacturing. What happens there? What happens when you're just looking at this from the research perspective and nobody wants to buy it? What happens to the artisans? Then how do you really create a supply and demand? And all of these questions sort of led me to also look at the business side of things. And as designers, we all know that eventually it does come down to the top line and the bottom line, and that's everybody's life. And I mean, everybody who's still not started a career will know that that will be your life, whether you are in a job or you're doing a business, that eventually rokda kahan se aayega is your base. So for me also, that's the same question. If I can't sustain, the artisans can't sustain, right? Nobody can sustain in my ecosystem. I can't pay my employees, I can't pay my team, I can't have a bigger team. And a lot of my sort of questions led me to, I am Ahmedabad and Bangalore, to sort of ask all of these questions. So I ended up just finishing the Goldman Sachs 10K Women Program, which was my last, basically 3 months were filled with valuation, industry analysis, cash flow management, costing, economics, statistics, etc. But I'm a nerd at heart, so I do get a kick out of these things. And how I sort of contextualize this into this ideal, sort of ambitious world that I'm trying to create through e-textiles and craft is basically what I'm trying to answer as I go along. And this is basically what my life looks like. Most days now it's not a lot of me. I miss that. Sometimes I have a very, very talented team. One of them is here, who actually helps me run the show. And a lot of it is just us hunkered over the cart or being on the field and, just really doing real life prototyping and just trying to move things along as much as possible. And I'm just going to leave this here. I can go into this, but again, I don't want to do like a catalog presentation here, guys. If you want one, you can reach out to us. But these are a bunch of the products that we do. And I'll just leave this here while I open the floor for questions. So anybody, I asked you guys to interrupt me, which you didn't, but now is your chance. And especially the students, if you don't ask any questions, I know who to speak. Yeah. Do you have a question? Yeah.
There is any electronic items in your clothes right now?
In my clothes? No, no. And I don't do wearables. And thank you for asking that. I don't do wearables. And this is a question that we get so often. Like every third question that I get asked is, why don't you make interactive clothes? Because fashion seems to be the sort of the most obvious extension of everything, that is new and interesting. But one of the reasons that I'm very clear about not sort of venturing into wearables is that the shelf life of a wearable is a lot shorter than something that goes into your spaces, number one. Number two, we're also looking at, while we're adding electronics into all of this, as a company, we are very ecologically focused. I'm not going to use the word sustainability, it's a jargon, people have murdered it to death. But we're very ecologically focused, which means that even the way we create our work, we ensure that there is modularity. We've had people who've bought from us like 2 years ago, and the tech has obviously evolved. We do like 2 to 3 versions of the tech every year, maybe more. They reached out to us and said, hey, look, I have this piece, can you upgrade it for me? This was something that was working with an app, and today we added like a speaker into it, a battery into it, etc. With the fabric being the same, the tech being the same, everything. So that's kind of what I mean by being ecologically conscious. Yeah, like there's a lot of amount of money and effort that goes into making these fabrics. Now, if I'm actually gonna have to rip the whole thing apart just because a new tech has come to light, it doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of how we follow. And wearables don't really give you that chance, the kind of shelf life and the kind of boredom that they create so quickly. Even the good garments that you buy, you're not going to wear them more than 7 times. Do you know that stat? It's interesting. It's very crazy. So that's kind of why, and therefore this also doesn't have any electronics. Any other questions? Yeah, hi.
Have you ever tried of incorporating RF with the circuit systems.
You want to take that, Hitanshi? Yeah, we did. In fact, we did this for an installation that we showed in Delhi. And now we use this tech actually in a very fun way. We added into small fabric tags which we give out at exhibitions, and it has our catalog in it and everything. So yes, we definitely do it. It's also sort of a question that we ask because it's an interesting thing. Obviously, you tap your phone against it, and there's like so many fun things that you can do with it. But at this point, our core area of expertise works with embedded tech in the fabric. Like we basically embed the circuit into the structure of the fabric. So we try to focus on that, and this is something that we meddle around as sort of how do I say this, has basically giveaways and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of tech that we do, like for example, we also work with these color changing prints and stuff like that. But again, those are our giveaways. Those go as bags or some kind of different products when you buy our products, things like that. So yeah, we do a lot of different things, but we try to focus our energy at this moment on this. Again, a very creative choice. There's no sort of scientific basis to that. It's just we are having more fun with this, and whatever we want to sort of we find it simpler, we park it away as giveaways. Yes, hi.
आपके जब अर्ली स्टेज था,
हाँ जी.
तो आपने बहुत सारे आइडियाज आते हैं,
हाँ.
आपने नैरो डाउन कैसे किया कि ये आइडिया पे काम करेगा?
लाइफ टाइम तो मेरे को नहीं पता, टू बी ऑनेस्ट. आई डोंट थिंक मैं आपको ये भी बोल पाऊंगी कि 6 महीने के बाद भी मैं इस पे काम कर रही होंगी. सो देर इज लाइफ टाइम मेरे को नहीं पता. बट लाइक आई सेड, मेरे को आउट ऑफ वट एवर आइडियाज, और मैंने पहले भी जितने आइडियाज के साथ काम किया वो सब डॉक्यूमेंटेड है. अभी भी कभी कुछ प्रोजेक्ट आता है कि कुछ आता है, तो ऑब्वियसली माई नाउ टीम वॉज नॉट अराउंड विथ मी देन, बट आई पुल बैक दैट रिसर्च एंड आई से मैंने तभी ये ट्राई किया था, दिस इज हाउ इट वर्क, दिस इज हाउ इट डिडंट. सो वो नॉलेज मेरे पास है. बट द रीजन दैट आई चोज दिस वॉज बिकॉज इसका मैजिक फैक्टर बहुत हाई था. एंड जब मेरे को मार्केट में उतरना था, इट वॉज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि मैं ऐसा कुछ करूँ जिससे लोगों का अटेंशन ग्रैब हो. नहीं तो इट्स जस्ट गोइंग टू बिकम वन ऑफ दोज, हाँ कुछ इंटरेस्टिंग कर रहे हैं बट समझ में नहीं आया क्या करते. सो दैट्स काइंड ऑफ हाउ आई केम अप विद द टच सेंसर एंड द म्यूजिक. लाइक व्हेन यू गो एंड टच अ फैब्रिक दैट प्लेज म्यूजिक, यू कैन रिमेंबर इट. वीव हैड पीपल जो 3 साल के बाद भी आके मेरे को बोलते हैं, हाँ मैंने ऐसा कहीं पे कुछ देखा था, रॉ में देखा था, एक्सेट्रा. सो इट हैज़ अ वेरी हैवी रिटेंशन फैक्टर, एंड फॉर मी टू एंटर इनटू अ मार्केट which didn't know what I was doing, it was very important to create a retention factor, and that's kind of what the music basically did for me. Yeah. Hi. Yeah.
So your base material is fabric.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought of anything else than fabric?
Yes. So again, textiles is, like I said, my medium of choice, but we do mess around with, now we have started to work with a lot of 3D sensors. We worked with terracotta, we worked with Bidri very recently at AD, which you didn't come to. And we also have now started working with wood. But what we do with all of these things is we still keep some kind of textile technique at its core. Matlab, even if we use any of these materials, it still either will be on a textile base, or it will have something sort of perforated through it, or it's some kind of collaboration between a solid material and a flexible material. We try to manage that, but yeah, we are now sort of starting to open our vocabulary from being pure fabrics into allied materials as well. Thank you. Any other questions? Really? Yeah, please ask.
How do you see this tech evolving in the future apart from plastic?
So at the end of the day, anything that has any kind of fabric significance in the world can use this tech, right? Whether it goes into screenless education, it goes into cars, like I said, or it goes into homes, it goes into murals, it goes into elder care, it goes into senior care, it goes into sort of any kind of sort of medico allied products, etc. But I think, to be honest, I don't have an answer to how I see this sort of manifesting itself in the future. I just know that my vision is to make sure that when somebody says the word e-textiles, you don't go, huh, what is that? And secondly, you definitely know that we know a company that does that really well, and that is Anuvad. Yeah.
Because you work with crafts so closely.
Yeah.
How do you view craft as? Because there are a lot of people now who put craft on a pedestal
Yes.
and it is not like involved in our daily life.
Yes.
Do you think it is the right way to view craft from a outer perspective?
That's actually a brilliant question, to be honest, and thank you for asking that. See, there is craft at the very core is a technique. Okay? But whatever you look at weaving, you look at bidri work, you look at leather work, it's a technique. There's a certain process to it, there's a certain rhythm to it, there's a certain, yes, it is steeped heavily into narratives, it's steeped heavily into ethnographic context, and all that makes it what, as powerful as it is. But at the very core is the technique. Now, the idea is that I personally feel, and this is something that, again, it's a bit of a controversial opinion, but it is something that I'm open to arguments. But I personally feel that craft at the very core is a technique that is extremely skilled, right? That needs to be protected. And craft, even in the beginning, was never meant to become a museum piece. Right? You are right. We've put it on a pedestal. We've sort of glorified it. And by glorify, I mean it in a negative connotation, not a sort of a good connotation. I mean that craft was always it was always about creating objects that are used into your day-to-day life. Pick any craft, out of the book, anything. It all came from a response to creating something for the day-to-day. It was never supposed to be like, yes, of course, there was occasion, there's some things you were made for the wedding, some things were made for like, the dowry, etc. There was a lot of significance attached to where and how it is placed. But it was always meant to be used. It was always supposed to become a part of your day-to-day life. And the moment you take it away from that, I feel you're not only sort of challenging the longevity of the craft, because there's only so many museum pieces you can have, right? And when you reach that level, what do? Do the artisans go out of work? What does the next generation do? So to me, anything that is sustainable has to have longevity, has to have something that you can sort of see the future follow. And to me, this is my way of doing it. There are obviously people who do design intervention, and they try to sort of see how craft can become more contextual in today's use cases, etc. So there are different sort of ways of addressing that, but it will not survive until and unless the weaver today has an order he has to fulfill, plain and simple. And your job as a designer is try to keep that as close to his core skill as possible, and only then you will possibly see that skill sort of being passed down to the next generation. If that skill is wiped out, the craft itself is wiped out. The context is always the second part of the circle, it's not the core. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
As someone who works very closely with artisans, what do you think is a challenge that you faced repetitively?
So one thing that really glared out, to me, again, I was coming from a context that I was not in India for a very long time. So I came back. So there was a lot that I was sort of looking at from a very different global lens. But one thing that really jumped out to me was that a lot of them have lost, I wouldn't say the skill or the ability, a lot of them have lost the confidence in their own choices and in their own thought process. And every time I said, आपको क्या लगता है, आपको जो कलर अच्छा लगता है चलो वो लगाते हैं टाइप्स, मेरे को कैसे पता होगा मैडम, ये तो आपको बताना होता है. That was a standard response. Now, cut to 15-20 years ago, nobody was telling them. The whatever community, let's say the Rabaris in terms of the Pujodi, would come and say, make me a Jaisalmeri shawl. Whether the Jaisalmeri shawl had a pink or a blue or whatever was the artisan's decision. And they had the core skill of that. But as designers, I think we've done a huge disadvantage to them by completely making them so dependent on us that they've lost the ability to think. They think that their ideas are not gonna work in the real world. So clearly they lack the design skills, and that's why I think the Somaya Kala Vidyalaya and all of these, design universities are doing a banger job. I think that is really going to make them completely be separate from us. And we've sort of created this very for the lack of a better word, a very toxic sort of relationship with the artisans, where we've figured out a way to make them so dependent on our thought processes that they don't know how to think otherwise. And we think that if we don't do that, we will not have work as designers, which is a huge misconception. If they have the design skills, we still will be able to collaborate, but now as partners. And what that does to you, your own psyche, is a question that one should ask themselves. But I really feel that I think was the biggest sort of thing that came out to me, also because I worked as a researcher for a very long time. I worked with crafts, so I know the ethnographic sort of history behind how all of this craft evolved. And it was literally a decision. The rabari stitch was, mere paas pink khatam ho gaya, maine yellow dal diya. That's kind of how you see a lamba pink and a chota yellow. No designer went and said, oh, bahut pink ho gaya, chalo yellow accent dal dete hain. So I think that is something that I don't know how much we can regain, but that should be possibly something that we should try to bring back in some form. Thank you.